Good morning. Mr Castleton.
Thank you, Your Honour. This is the inquiry into the Adaminaby complex fire in the Snowy Monero local government area encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people. This fire burned, Your Honour, for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 100,000 hectares. It impacted numerous townships, including Adaminaby, Mount Morgan, Mount Selwyn, Nungar and Shannon's Flat. The location of this fire is set out in the following map, which I'll have displayed for Your Honour's benefit now. Your Honour will see two red markers. The top right-hand marker depicts the ignition of the Bugtown fire, which I'll come to shortly, and the bottom left marker depicts the area of origin for the Doubtful Gap Fire. And Your Honour sees a body of water slightly to the southeast of the south of the Bugtown ignition point, and that's Lake Yukonbean or Yukonbean Dam as a general reference point. The township, Your Honour, of Adaminaby is on the eastern side of the Snowy Mountain Plateau and on the edge of the Kosciuszko National Park. It is approximately 50 kilometres northwest of Cooma. Most of this area is rugged bushland with sporadic farming country and private properties on either side of the Snowy Mountains Highway. Your Honour will hear evidence similar to the other inquiries held to date in regards to the 2019-2020 bushfire season of a significant band of lightning across the southeast of New South Wales during the last days of December in 2019. The Adaminaby complex fire was a culmination of multiple ignitions, all caused by lightning. Your Honour will also hear that the fire crossed into different local government areas, and Your Honour will hear of the conventions of the RFS in regard to the naming and mapping of fires. This fire, although encompassing a number of different fires, was managed by the Cooma Incident Management Team. It should be noted that the Duns Road fire overran most of these fires, known as the Adaminaby complex, in early January 2020. The Rural Fire Service declared this fire to be out on 16 February 2019. It burnt for 48 days. 2 residences were destroyed, while about 30 other properties or structures were damaged or destroyed. The Court will hear from the officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Senior Constable Ben Waldron, in regard to the cause, origin and the progression of the fire. In this regard, evidence will be called in regard to the multiple ignitions referred to as the Bugtown fire, the Coolerman complex ignitions and Doubtful Gap fire. If I can come firstly to the Bugtown fire, Your Honour, the lightning that likely caused the Bugtown fire was in the afternoon of 31 December and was first observed by Warren Menzies. He was a local resident and called 000 at 2:25 p.m. on that day. He lived at Angler's Reach, from which Mr Menzies had a substantial view to the north and onto Bugtown. I'll just have brought up now, Your Honour, a map which shows the likely point of origin of the Bugtown fire, and it's the red marker to the north of Lake Yukonbean. Your Honour, Mr Menzies, who will give evidence later today, described his observation in his witness statement to New South Wales Police as follows. About 2 p.m, whilst looking north, I saw lightning strike on at least 3 occasions towards Bugtown Road and 3 times in the vicinity of Mars Hill, about 2 kilometres north of the property. Concerned about a possible fire, I drove down to the boat ramp on Lake Yukonbean Dam and filled up my water tanks. The trip, there and back again, took about 20 minutes. When I returned to the property, I could see a small column of smoke coming from the vicinity of where the lightning struck, towards Bugtown Road. By this time, the dark cloud had moved overhead, sending the area into darkness. It felt like the end of the world. I took a further photograph at this point, looking north over the property. At 2:45 p.m, concerned with the growing fire, I contacted 000 from my mobile. I told the operator that lightning had struck farmland, possibly Bugtown Road at Imagery, and was growing. The operator told me that she would advise the RFS. I'll just bring up a further photograph. That's one of the photographs that Mr Menzies took on that afternoon on the 31st of December. And there are some other photographs that Mr Menzies took showing the evolution of the fire, and they will be explained in Mr Menzies' evidence today. I come now, Your Honour, to the Coolerman complex ignitions. The court will also hear that on the afternoon of 31 December, the Rural Fire Service requested and obtained the assistance of a Firebird 100 helicopter in order to observe, document and map fires commenced by lightning in the area. Firebird 100 undertook this surveillance in the area north-northwest of Imagery, known as a lightning run. On this lightning run, a further ignition was identified. This ignition was referred to as the Coolerman complex ignition. Your Honour will now see displayed a thermal image photograph taken from, just the next one down, I think. Page 35? Right. That shows the point of origin, as I understand it, of the Coolerman complex ignitions, Your Honour. And then if we go to a map of the area, which is found at page 48 of Detective Senior Constable Wardren's statement, Your Honour will get a general overview as to the nature of the country where the likely area of origin for the Coolerman complex ignitions was thought to have occurred. And that Coolerman complex ignition was north of the Bugtown, the original Bugtown ignition, Your Honour. The brief of evidence contains numerous Rural Fire Service SITREPs or situation reports in regard to the identification and mapping of these fires. There was also a further ignition to the west of this northern cluster, which in those first few days was referred to as the Nungar Ridge Fire. The RFS completed a fire spread prediction map of these three fires on the late afternoon of 31 December 2019. Your Honour will see that fire spread prediction displayed shortly. Just wondering whether we can have that magnified. And then, if we go then to the fire progression map found at page 62, please, of the officer in charge's statement. And you see that, Your Honour sees those three ignition points that occurred on the 31st of December 2019, all within a general area. And Your Honour sees Lake Yukonbean Dam, that large body of water to the north of the map. Your Honour, I come now to the Doubtful Gap Fire. In addition to those three fires to which I've just referred, also on the 31st of December 2019, there was a further ignition. This occurred in the area of the Doubtful Gap Fire Trail. This was a very remote area and difficult to access. Due to the location and the close proximity to the Duns Road fire, there was no ground or aerial reconnaissance undertaken. Investigating police analysed the lightning strike data for this day and have identified the particular lightning recorded that afternoon in the vicinity of the Doubtful Gap Fire Trail. And Your Honour will see that displayed now. Due to the difficult terrain and the location of the Doubtful Gap Fire, together with the proximity of the Duns Road fire, This fire was not the focus of RFS resources for a number of days following ignition. Your Honour will see next a fire progression map of the relevant area for the 31st of December 2019, which shows these two areas and the lightning activity. So Your Honour sees that for that period of time, 31st of December, the lightning recorded in that eastern portion of New South Wales. Your Honour, the brief of evidence demonstrates that these numerous ignitions merged and were all referred to and were renamed the Adaminaby Complex Fire. The fire progression map generated on the 1st of January 2020 shows these fires not long after ignition. And Your Honour will see that in the next fire progression map. Your Honour will see slightly to the right of the southernmost point of the Duns Road fire, which is the brown area, Doubtful Gap Trail. Your Honour will see north of the township of Adaminaby, the Adaminaby Complex Fire, and then within that Adaminaby Complex, Your Honour might be able to pick up Nungar, of which there were some fires at Nungar, ignition points at Nungar and Nungar Ridge. Your Honour, the fires continue to burn, and on the 4th of January 2020 progressed significantly. On this day, the Doubtful Gap Fire merged with the Duns Road Fire. The remaining Adaminaby Complex fires ran between 18 and 34 kilometres to the southeast on that day. This was considered to be a significant run and was extreme fire behaviour. And Your Honour will see that in the next fire progression map. Your Honour will see now that that southern eastern edge of Duns Road has now merged with the Doubtful Gap Fire, and to the north east of Doubtful Gap, Your Honour sees the Adaminaby Complex, and that those various ignitions, of which there were a number of fires, have merged to form that grey band in that section, which was on that day or shortly thereafter renamed the Adaminaby Complex Fire. On 11 January, these fires amalgamated with the Doubtful Gap Fire. The officer in charge explains in his statement that from this point onwards, all these fires were managed as the Adaminaby Complex Fire. The fire continued to spread in numerous directions over the following days and the remainder of January. In early February, the fire was mapped as not spreading and was authorised as out, as I previously said, on 16 February 2020. The next progression map shows the extent of the fires as at the 16th of February 2020, and Your Honour will see that the Adaminaby Complex has clearly merged with that portion of Doubtful Gap which was part of then the Duns Road Fire at that point in time. The area of the Adaminaby Complex Fire, Your Honour, was investigated by the RFS and by New South Wales Police. The RFS assigned fire investigator Mike Fraturo to investigate the cause and origin of these fires. Mr Fraturo examined the area of the Bugtown Fire and determined a particular tree was the subject of lightning and the origin of the fire. It should be noted that only one ignition point was examined at this time. Mr Fraturo will give evidence shortly, Your Honour. New South Wales Police assigned Crime Scene Officer Mark Hollands from the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command, or FETS, to undertake a further examination of the cause and origin of the various fires that made up the Adaminaby Complex Fire. Mr Hollands will be called to give evidence in regard to these examinations. On 19 February 2020, the FETS team reviewed the likely multiple ignition points for these fires and completed aerial reconnaissance of the fire grounds. On 20 and 21 February 2020, the FETS team then completed a ground examination. A number of sites, referred to as hotspots, were visited by air and on the ground, together with an examination of the related lightning strike data in those areas. The lightning strike data was mapped against the likely areas of origin for the Bugtown and Doubtful Gap fires. And Your Honour will see that in the next map. Your Honour sees, again, that band of lightning that was recorded across that southeastern section of New South Wales. Your Honour sees the red circle, which depicts the Bugtown ignition, and Your Honour sees that there were a number of lightning strikes recorded in that general area. And then to the left of Bugtown ignition, Your Honour has the Doubtful Gap area of likely origin within the blue circle. And Your Honour just sees that to the north of Doubtful Gap, Your Honour sees the extent of the Duns Road fire within the Snowy Valleys local government area. What I might do is also have brought up a satellite image which assists in identifying some of those ignition points. If we start at the red square, that's the Doubtful Gap ignition point or area of origin, and then moving up towards the blue square and a number of markers in and around that blue square are those ignition points that came to be known as the Imagery complex fire. And I stand to be corrected, but the yellow marker near Angler's Reach is where Mr Menzies' property was when he took those photographs, which Ron will come to see when he gives his evidence shortly. The damage caused by the fire was surveyed by New South Wales Police. There was significant damage caused to the properties on the Selwyn ski fields and Kyandra. These properties were destroyed by the Duns Road fire, but were recorded as having occurred under the banner of the Imagery complex fire. 2 properties were destroyed. One of these was a rural property on Yayak Road at 2668, and there's a photo, and I'll come to that shortly. Senior Constable Bennett attended this property on the 5th of January. He says in his statement the following in relation to that damage. On the morning of Sunday, 5th January, I had a conversation with the Imagery RFS Group Captain, Glenn Squire, who told me about a house on a rural property on Yayak Road being lost to the bushfire. I attended this property shortly afterwards, which is called Warragul, and it's located at 2668 Yayak Road at Imagery. This property is a rural property which is 3,000 acres in size, consisting of mixed bush and grazing country. The dwelling on this property was a 4-bedroom house and was situated at the front of the property, about 100 metres from Yayak Road. This dwelling was surrounded by bushland at the rear and has lawn and gardens at the front. It also had a large concrete in-ground water tank located about 20 metres from the front of the house. When I attended this house, I saw the house was completely destroyed by fire, with only parts of the shell remaining. There was a 2-car Coolerman garage still standing to the left of the house, which appeared untouched by the fire. I used my phone to take 3 photos of the house. I'll just see if we can have those 3 photographs brought up, Your Honour. Your Honour, the second property destroyed was at 2475 Yayak Road. Mark Hollands took a series of photographs of this property on the 20th of February, and I'll have those photographs displayed now, Your Honour. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks in relation to Your Honour's inquiry into the Imagery complex fire. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I tender the brief of evidence in relation to that fire, and as I'm instructed that that will become Exhibit 15A.
Yes, thank you, Mr Castleton.
I now call Detective Senior Constable Ben Wardren.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Have a seat. Thank you, Detective.
Detective, would you please state your full name?
Ben Waldron.
And are you a Detective Senior Constable attached to the State Crime Command Arson Unit?
I am.
Were you tasked to undertake an investigation into a series of fires known as the Imagery complex fire?
I was.
And were you appointed as the officer in charge of that investigation?
That's correct.
As part of that investigation, how many other police officers were you able to pull in to assist in that endeavour?
I was directly assigned one, but I was allowed to borrow another person who was on restricted, and they worked from Cooma for me. So.
Thank you. You have provided, have you not, a lengthy statement in relation to those fires?
That's correct.
Do you have a copy of that statement with you this morning?
I do.
Are there any matters that you wish to correct or not?
No, there's not.
From your investigations, are you able to say what the likely cause of each of the ignitions, to which we will come to shortly, in relation to the complex fires known as the Imagery complex fire?
Yeah, I can say the likely cause is lightning for all.
And did that fire burn for approximately 48 days, to your understanding?
Yeah, from the 31st of December to the 16th of February.
And in terms of the area that burnt, was it in the order of 98,484 hectares?
That's correct.
And in terms of damage to structures, were there 34 structures damaged?
There was 30 structures destroyed and 4 damaged.
And of those were, in terms of destroyed, were there two homes or residences?
2 residences, yes.
And they were both on Yayak Road, if that's pronounced correctly?
Yayak Road? Yeah.
Yayak Road.
I've heard it pronounced 3 or 4 different ways, so...
We'll try and remain consistent as best one can. And did you see the photographs of the damage to those 2 residents displayed shortly in court this morning?
Yes, I have, and I've been to both addresses.
Now, what I might have brought up now, if it's convenient, is the image at page 4 of Exhibit 15A. Detective, I'm working off page 4 of Exhibit A. Is that an image which provides an overview of the Imagery complex fire in terms of a general area of ignition?
That's correct.
Does the blue circle represent the general area of ignition for that fire that became known as the Doubtful Gap Fire?
That's correct.
And the red circle to the north-east of Doubtful Gap, does that depict the area of ignition for the Bugtown fire?
And the associated ignitions.
And that includes...
Coolerman Complex, Nungar, and Nungar Ridge.
Now we'll go to the next image, page 5 of Exhibit 15A, just to bring up a satellite image. Now, you've attended that general area, have you not?
I have.
Just starting with the red circle, which is Bugtown, How would you describe the topography or the terrain in that general area?
It's rugged terrain, mountain slopes either side of it. It's a part of the snowy plateau, where it's just grasslands and treed mountains either side. It's well over 1,000 metres high. So.
And are there any structures such as power lines or buildings in that general area, or not?
No, there's not.
So it's pure bushland.
Yes.
And moving then to the blue circle, which I understand depicts the Doubtful Gap general area of origin of ignition. Again, could you please describe the terrain or the topography in that general area?
Yeah, it's river valleys with large mountain peaks. It's known as Janungal Wilderness Area, which we went out there and the trails out there hadn't been used for years.
And this area that we're seeing displayed in that satellite image, does that fall within the Snowy Monaro local government area?
It does.
Is there much farming land around those two areas of origin at all, or not?
There's parts, yeah. There's about the completion of the fire. It was 98,000 hectares. I think 83,000 hectares were national park and 11,000 hectares were pastoral land.
Thank you. Now I'll just go to another image, which is page 6 within your statement of Exhibit 15A, just to give her on an appreciation of where these two likely ignition points sit more broadly within the southeastern portion of New South Wales. And you may be able to see there the township of Adaminaby directly below the Bugtown area of origin, and then you want to see that you've got the Kosciuszko National Park, which comes down towards the Doubtful Gap area of origin. Go then, please, to an image, page 7 of Exhibit 15A. Now, does this show the Snowy Monaro local government area?
That's correct.
And in relation to these particular fires, were they assigned by the New South Wales RFS to the Monaro Alpine Fire District?
That's correct.
And was the Fire Control Centre located at Cooma?
That's correct. They also have a secondary one at Jindabyne.
At Jindabyne.
Yes.
And doing the best you can, how far is Cooma from the Bugtown ignition point? Is it in the order of about 50 kilometres?
That's correct.
To the
Northwest.
northwest. And the Fire Control Centre was located at Cooma. I take it also the incident management team was embedded within that Fire Control Centre at Cooma.
That's correct.
Now, if we could then go, please, to the weather data at page 21 of Exhibit A. Is it your understanding, Detective, that the nearest weather station was at the Cooma Airport?
That's correct.
And I just want to take you to some aspects, if I may, to the conditions, the weather conditions on the 31st of December 2019. You may need to refer to your written statement because it may be clearer, but just focusing on the 31st of December 2019, are there any features of that weather data or observations recorded at Cooma on that day that are significant
It's actually
in relation to fire behaviour?
Yeah, it's actually on the 29th. Starting on the 29th, you'll see that there's sporadic amounts of rain, 2 mils of 1.8 mil.
Yes.
They're generated from storms.
So from those thunderstorms?
Yeah, which were, part thereof reflecting from Duns Road fire. And then on the 30th, there was another series of storms with the low humidity at 3 o'clock at 17%, the relative humidity, and the winds were coming from the north-northwest on the 31st.
Thank you. And we see that throughout the month of December, next to no rainfall in that Cooma area, it seems.
That's correct.
And then if we move to the next month, the month of January 2020, again, the daily weather observations recorded at the Coolerman Airport weather station. Can I just direct your attention to the 4th of January? Now, was there a significant run on that day in relation to these fires that had commenced on the 31st of December 2019?
That's correct.
And again, is there any features of the weather observations recorded for the 4th of January 2020 that are noteworthy?
Again, the wind speed and the temperature and relative humidity at 3 p.m.
And what is it about wind speed and a low relative humidity that may fuel fire behaviour?
When you get to about 8%, it's basically completely dry air. So we've been to fires before where we've turned up and logs have reignited at about 8%. And generally that doesn't happen down the southern part of New South Wales. It's usually the north and northwestern slopes. So anything under that 20% humidity is dangerous. It's just dry. And if you've got 2 preceding days, it's a lot worse on the second day.
And is it your understanding from your investigation that leading up to the end of December 2019 that there'd been prolonged drought?
That's correct.
Throughout New South Wales and that area as well?
That's correct.
And fuel loads were very, very high?
That's correct.
Could I just come now to the image on page 28 of Exhibit 15A. Now, do we have there the blue circle which shows the Bugtown ignitions to which we've been referring?
That's correct.
And is the red circle the badge of forest fire?
That's correct.
That had already commenced
On the 27th.
on the 27th of December and took some big runs on the 30th and 31st of December 2019.
That's correct.
Did those two fires eventually merge or not? If we go then to page 29 of Exhibit 15A, again, does the blue circle in that map, Detective, refer to the Bugtown ignitions?
That's correct.
And does the red circle refer to the Good fire?
That's the ignition point of Good, yes.
Right. And did those two fires merge or not?
No, they did not.
Right. Now, if we then go to the image at page 31 of Exhibit 15A, I'll just get you to explain some features of this particular map, Detective, when it comes up. Now, does Bugtown, or that is the Bugtown ignition, do we see that in the blue?
No, that's in the red.
In the Bugtown's in the red, is it? Right. The caption under the image says Bugtown ignition, yes, blue circle. Good is the red. Duns Road, which received some evidence on last week, is in the top left-hand corner in green.
That's correct.
And Doubtful Gap is at the purple fire.
That's correct.
Now, does this map show the locations of those particular fires as at the 4th of January 2020?
That's the ignition points. It doesn't show the scope of the fire.
Right. And was it around about the 4th of January 2020 that the Duns Road fire has merged with the Doubtful Gap fire?
Yeah, from satellite imagery, it's between 3 and 4 p.m. in the afternoon of the 4th.
And at about that time, did the Duns Road fire spread approximately 80 kilometres in a single day, or just shortly?
28 hours from the afternoon of was that the 30th to the 31st?
Thank you. And we then go to the next image at page 34 of Exhibit 15A. Do we see there, firstly, the significant lightning that was recorded
Yes, we can.
on the 31st of December 2019?
It's between 11 o'clock on the 31st to 11 o'clock on the 1st.
Right, so
24-hour window.
I'll just have that brought up shortly, Your Honour. Now, Detective, is the Doubtful Gap ignition the blue circle?
That's correct.
And is the Bugtown ignitions or the Coolerman complex ignitions the red circle?
Yes, they are.
And then what I might do is then go to an image at page 120 of Exhibit 15A, which, Your Honour, shows a more localised view of those lightning strikes recorded between the 27th of December and the 31st of December 2019.
That's correct.
Blue's Doubtful Gap and red's Bugtown ignitions.
That's correct. And the blue arrow that goes between the red line is the line of the storm, as recorded by Rfs on the day.
Tracking in a sort of southeast direction.
Yeah, towards the Good Fire and Badger Fire.
Thank you, Detective. Now, I just want to deal now with the point of origin, if I may, for the Bugtown ignitions. And that, again, may be best done by displaying the image at page 36 of Exhibit 15A. In relation to the Bugtown ignition, Detective, was there a specific point of origin identified for the Bugtown ignition?
Yes, there was.
And what's your understanding in relation to that specific point of origin?
They determined that both Rfs and our FETS officer attended the scene and located a tree that had been impacted by lightning.
And as a result, and that, I take it there was a ground-based examination?
There was an aerial one done first.
Yes.
And a ground-based one done as well.
And they were able then to obtain GPS coordinates as to the specific location of a specific tree that
That's correct.
appeared to have been struck by lightning.
That's correct.
Do we see there, having regard to those GPS coordinates, a reasonably precise location of the Bugtown ignition?
That's correct.
In relation to the observations of that ignition, that is the Bugtown ignition, is it your understanding, your inquiries that Mr Menzies, who had a property on Anglers Reach, made certain observations in relation to the evolution of that fire on the 31st of December 2019?
Yes, he did.
And were those observations, to your understanding, made in the mid-afternoon on that day?
Yes.
I won't go into too much in relation to Mr Menzies' evidence because he'll be called later today. Can I ask if we could have the table, please, brought up on page 39 of Exhibit 15A. And, Detective, you see there a number of ignitions or fires within that Adaminaby complex fire. Can I ask you this, and we'll come to it shortly, but a Firebird 100, which is a helicopter as I understand it, took a number of images over the period of the 31st of December 2019 and following, is that so? And identified a number of hotspot areas which may correlate to ignition points.
Yes, he did.
Are you able to correlate each specific ignition that we see in this table to specific hotspots or not? Or is that simply too difficult because there are so many hotspots?
There was more than what was reported as well.
Yes. Okay. But certainly the ones that we see in this table were significant ignition points that grew into quite large fires.
Yes, they did.
I'll just now bring up a map at page 40 of Exhibit 15A, sorry, a satellite image, in relation to Mr. Menzies, Warren Menzies' property. Do we see there, the red circle is the likely point of origin where that lightning struck tree was positioned?
Yes.
And then does the blue represent Mr. Menzies' property on Anglers Reach Road?
That's correct.
Now, do you know is the distance between those 2 points?
Probably 10 kilometres in a straight line.
So as the crow flies, about 10 kilometres between those 2 points.
That's correct.
Now, we've mentioned already the Firebird 100. If we could go please to page 45 of Exhibit 15A. Just might have your detective explain as best you can how the technology contained within Firebird 100 works and is able to assist the RFS and others in terms of identifying ignition points. Now, do we see here an image that was taken on the 31st of December 2019, about 3:54 p.m?
That's correct.
And this is an image taken from Firebird 100. What's the technology that is used to obtain that image that we see on the screen now?
So Firebird 100 is an ACT appliance. It's fitted with a thermal imaging camera. It has the ability to swap between thermal imaging, which is the bigger picture, and then a normal picture. So their normal video camera is the top right-hand corner, which obviously because of the smoke you can't see anything.
That's why it's dark.
Yeah, that's why it's dark.
But on a clear day, you would see a clear picture of what.
Yes, and this technology allows you when you're flying within fires, where visibility is poor, to switch between the 2 different cameras.
And the larger image, which is the infrared, is it infrared or thermal imaging? Does the orange, in effect, correspond to areas of intense fire?
That's it. That's correct.
And in terms of distance, what's the scale that we see? Do you know or not?
So I suppose what you would call the wings, the little the measurement above the fire is metres.
Yes.
And then the little cross in the centre is where they're mapping the GPS coordinates on the right-hand side of the image.
And on the 31st of December, in the late afternoon, early evening, is it your understanding that Firebird or FB 100 undertook what's known as a lightning run?
That's correct.
In that area around Adaminaby, Bugtown, Shannon's Flat, and of course Doubtful Gap?
They didn't do Doubtful Gap. Was just no one knew about the fire at Doubtful Gap at that stage.
And as a result of that lightning run, were they able to identify multiple ignition points in that general area?
Yes, they were.
In terms of New South Wales Rural Fire Services response, to your understanding, what was the response to those multiple ignitions in terrain that you've described as rugged and difficult?
So the first response was through the AAA call, not through the helicopter. Adaminaby Fire Brigade was sent to the Bugtown ignitions because they're the only ones they knew about at that time.
Yes.
Looking at the lightning data, the other ignitions were later that afternoon, so either 3 o'clock, but between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock through other storms. They've gone. We've spoken to the deputy captain that attended there, and it was in 3 foot high grass and stuff like that, and fairly rugged. They've tried to work out where the fire was and how it was behaving, but at that stage, because of the storms and the weather, it was and where it was very difficult to fight.
In terms of the lightning, was the band of lightning affecting that general area between about 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. on the 31st?
1:58 is the registered lightning strike for the Bugtown ignition.
Yes.
And then later on towards 5 o'clock are the ones further north.
And you mentioned Triple O a moment ago. Was the first notification a Triple O call made by Warren Menzies in relation to the Bugtown ignition?
That's correct.
And that was at about 2:45.
25 past. He says it was 2:45, but the telephone record says 2:25.
2:25 p.m. on the 31st.
It fits in with his timeline of 20 minutes going down to the water, filling up the tank and coming back, and basically ringing straight away.
Right. If we could please have brought up the fire progression map, page 55 of Exhibit 15A. Now, what do we have here, Detective?
That's the 2 known ignitions at Bugtown. And the RFS have done a fire progression map off that.
And that's solely for the 31st of December. And
For the 2 ignitions they knew at the time.
And that was mapped at about 5:30 p.m.
Yeah, I think the data's from about 4:49, I think it says at the bottom. But mapped at 5 o'clock.
Now, was there another ignition in that general area around Bugtown known as the Nungar Fire?
That's correct.
And did that also ignite on the 31st of December 2019? And where does Nungar sit in relation to Bugtown?
So you've got Lake Yukonbeam, which is at the south.
Yes?
Bugtown's there. Then the next lake upstream is Lake Talabingo. And it's sort of the mountainous edge to Lake Talabingo.
Right.
To the right.
And near to Nungar, was there another ignition that was known as the Nungar Ridge Fire? And where does that sit in relation to Nungar?
A little bit further northwest.
Northwest, okay.
Not very, they're fairly close.
And again, an ignition that started on the 31st of December 2019.
That's correct.
What we might do is, Your Honour, have the image at page 62 of Exhibit 15A brought up, please. Which may help identify some of those ignition points. Now, Detective, this is a RFS Fire Progression Map. Do we have in the top left the Nungar Fire?
That's correct.
And then the Coolerman Complex Fire, the top right?
That's correct.
And then the cluster in the middle to the south of the map is at the Bugtown ignition points?
That's correct.
Did the Coolerman Complex Fire merge with the Nungar Fire? The Nungar Ridge Fire?
Nungar Ridge and Nungar had amalgamated earlier.
Right.
And they burnt to the east and burnt into the Coolerman Complex.
And did the Coolerman Complex, of which there's those other earlier ignitions, merge into the Bugtown Fire?
That's correct.
And did that all occur on about the 4th of January 2019?
That's correct.
Was there a run on the 4th of January 2019 in relation to these fires or these ignitions?
It's a significant run, yes.
And when you say significant, what was significant about that run?
The distance of the run.
And how far did it travel in a single day, to your understanding?
It was over 20 kilometres. I have to look at exactly how the distance, but
And in what general direction did it head?
east-southeast.
Did it merge with any other fires or not?
At that stage, no.
Did it come to merge with some other fires on or around the 11th of January?
Doubtful Gap burnt into the side of, or Duns Road, Doubtful Gap burnt into the side of Adamini on the 11th.
On the 11th. And by that stage, Duns Road had already merged, I think it was on the 4th of January 2019, with the Doubtful Gap Fire.
That's correct.
Now that fire, or fires, did they continue to burn throughout January and into February?
Yes, they did.
And did they come to be declared out by New South Wales RFS on the 16th of February 2020?
That's correct.
Right. What I might do, Your Honour, if it's convenient, is just to show the development of those fires over some particular time frames. If we could have please brought up page 78 of Exhibit 15A. Your Honour, Detective, is this a fire progression map for a 24-hour period between the 1st of January and the 2nd of January 2020?
That's correct.
And does the brown portion reflect the Duns Road fire?
That's the Duns Road up to that stage, yes.
And at that point in time, we see the early evolution of the Imagery complex fire and also the Doubtful Gap Fire.
That's correct.
And obviously compared to Duns Road and indeed Green Valley Talmalmo, in terms of size, far smaller in size at that moment in time.
That's correct.
Then if we move to the next fire progression map, Detective, which is page 85. Now, there are obviously other progression maps in between, but I'm really just wanting to bring up a number that just shows some of those runs that you referred to earlier. Page 85 of Exhibit 15A, please. Now, does this show the fire progression for the 24-hour period 4 January to 5 January 2020?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned that there was a significant run on the 4th of January 2020. Is it your understanding that the Doubtful Gap fire spread approximately 5 kilometres to the southeast prior to its heel merging with the head of the Duns Road fire on the 4th of January?
That's correct.
And in relation to the Imagery complex fire, as at the 4th of January 2020, did it spread in the order of 18 to 24 kilometres to the southeast?
That's correct.
And we see that displayed on that fire progression map.
Yes, we can.
And we then move to page 86 of Exhibit 15A. Now, I just want to show a series of satellite images, Detective. There's 3 in total. Firstly, what sort of satellite imagery do we see on the screen now?
It's the Hawaii satellite.
And what is that?
So basically when RFS can't get an aerial image from a drone, they'll swap to the satellite imagery to try to work out the heat map of a fire. Generally the heat will come up as, obviously with this one, orange. Sometimes due to cloud cover and all the rest, it can come up as a bright blue.
Is it a heat signature?
That's correct.
Now, you've marked on this satellite imagery 3 different circles. Does the blue circle depict the Duns Road fire, that is the southeastern front of that fire?
That's the southeastern head, yes.
And this is for an image taken at about 2 p.m. on the 4th of January?
That's correct.
And does the red circle depict the Doubtful Gap fire?
That's correct.
And then the green is at the Imagery complex fire?
That's correct.
Now, this is at 2 p.m. If we then move to the next satellite image at page 87 of Exhibit 15A, is this a satellite image in relation to a heat signature taken 1 hour later?
That's correct.
And what do we see there that's of some significance?
The Duns Road fire's moved significantly to the southeast. The heat has gone a little bit out of the Doubtful Gap fire. The Duns Road has run into the heel of the fire into the heel of the Doubtful Gap, and anonymity is also spotted as well.
And is that spotting contained within a purple circle?
That's correct. From memory, it's jumped the Murrumbidgee River. That's the reason for the distance between the two.
And do you know what the distance was in terms of spotting on that day?
From those 2 points?
Yeah.
The anonymity fire was about 1.8 k's.
Right. So it was spotting about 1.8 kilometres in front of the...
That particular spot, there was other spots, but that particular spot that took off was either side of the valley, so it was about 1.8 k's.
And we might go to one final satellite image, which is taken 1 hour later again at 4 p.m. on the 4th of January 2020. And again, Detective, what does this image show in relation to the evolution of these three particular fires?
So it shows that the Duns Road fire is completely run into the heel of Doubtful Gap, and they are now one fire. And the Imagery fire, the spot fire, has been rejoined up with the main fire.
Now, when one compares the last image with the first image, there seems to be a greater area of intensity reflected by the colour red.
That's correct.
Is that consistent with this fire being or generating significant heat at the time that the image was taken, or not?
Correct. And the blue also could indicate the fact that the fire's now gone by cumulus.
And then I'll just have displayed, Detective, the fire progression map at page 91, just to put what we've just seen into a topographical map. And now we see quite clearly the progression of the fire between the 5th of January and the 6th of January clearly shows the merging of Duns Road with the Doubtful Gap Fire and that run that the Imagery Complex Fire took on the 4th in that south-easterly direction towards the coastline.
That's correct.
Now, you've mentioned in your evidence already that on the 11th of January 2020 there was a merger between what now became the Duns Road Fire, having merged on the 4th with Doubtful Gap, that fire has then merged with the Imagery Complex Fire. And if we have displayed, please, the fire progression map at page 98 of Exhibit 15A, does that then show the extent of those fires in southeastern New South Wales?
It does.
Now, does the black or dark grey area on that fire progression map as at the 11th to the 12th of January depict, in effect, the merger of the heel of Duns Road, which was the Doubtful Gap Fire, with the Imagery Complex Fire?
That's correct.
And do we see to the left of that fire, we have the Green Valley Taumamo Fire also merging with Duns Road?
Or East Ernie.
The East Ernie.
East Ernie is the little...
East Ernie Creek, you're quite right. Thank you.
Which goes into Duns Road.
And I'll just go now, if I may, Detective, to the final fire progression map as at the 16th of February 2020 when the fire was declared out. That's found at page 107. it may be hard to see, but it's the hashed area that extends really from, it's hard to see, there's a caption yellow, is it Yellow Bug Road?
There's a line, right? Yeah, Yellow Bug Road. There's a line, black line running south to north.
Yes.
Which is to Mill Road. That's the line.
Thank you.
Of separation.
And that was in the order, I think, you established earlier, about 98,484 hectares in that general area. Of that, could you just say again how much of it was sort of national park or bushland?
It was 83,000 hectares of national park land and 11,000 pastoral.
Now, in terms of damage, you've given some evidence already in relation to structures. Do you know what the figures were in relation to livestock losses as a result of the...
The primary industries have done it via LGAs for us, local government areas. So within the Monero, Snowy Monero, it was only about 390 livestock died, but it was 3,000 kilometres of fencing.
Would you say that again, please?
3,000 kilometres of fencing.
So fencing, 3,000 kilometres were destroyed or damaged as a result of those fires?
That's correct.
Yes, thank you, Detective. There may be some questions by Mr Newton, so please bear with us.
Mr Newton?
Your Honour, no questions.
Thanks very much, Detective. Excused.
Your Honour, the next witness is Mr Mark Hollands, who I understand is in the virtual waiting room and can be brought in.
Mr Hollands, can you see and hear us? Can you just speak again, please, Mr Hollands?
Sorry, I've unmuted myself now. I
There you
apologise.
are. That's all right. You'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr Hollands, would you like to take the oath or the affirmation?
The oath, please.
Thank you. Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Mr Hollands, would you please state your full name?
Mark Jeffrey Ackland Hollands.
And are you a senior crime scene officer attached to the Wollongong crime scene section within the New South Wales Police?
That's correct.
And have you undertaken a cause and origin investigation into the Imagery complex fire?
That's correct, I have.
And as a result of that investigation, have you produced a statement dated the 4th of September 2020, but signed by you, it appears, on the 28th of March 2021?
That's correct.
Are there any matters that require correction within that expert statement or not?
There's a mislabelled chart number, which would be, I'll just, using the red numbers, I'll just go to that. So page 212, that chart 11, we'll just rename it as the Imagery Fire Hotspot 7 and Lightning Data Chart. And the subsequent chart numbers after that should be fine.
Thank you. Apart from that matter, do you otherwise adhere to the opinions you've expressed throughout your expert report?
I do.
Have you, Mr Hollands, been employed by New South Wales Police since February 2003?
That's correct.
And since that time, have you attended a large number of crime or incident scenes?
That's correct, yes, of varying natures.
And as part of your duties as a crime scene officer, have you undertaken a number of wildfire cause and origin investigations.
That's correct. Probably approximately 20 wildfire investigations.
And were you in December of 2012 accredited as an expert in the methodology of crime scene investigations?
That's correct, I was.
And have you, as part of your education and training as a crime scene officer, completed courses relating to structural fire investigation and also wildfire investigation?
That's correct, yes.
Now, in relation to the Adaminaby complex fire, did you undertake an aerial inspection of the area of likely origin for those multiple ignition points?
That's correct, I did. I believe it was February the 18th of 2020.
18th or 19th of February 2020?
I'll just refer to the statement.
Paragraph 19 on page 202, if that assists.
Yes, it does. Sorry, correction. It was Wednesday the 19th. I attended, flew over the areas of interest, and subsequent days after that were scene examinations.
In relation to the Adaminaby complex fire, was that the amalgamation of a number of fires which included the Coolerman complex fire?
That's correct.
The Nungar fire?
Correct.
Nungar Ridge fire?
Correct.
Bugtown fire?
Yes.
Doubtful Gap Trail fire?
Correct.
Yayak Road fire?
Correct.
Illawong Road fire?
Correct.
Snowy Mountains Highway fire?
Correct.
Mount Morgan fire?
Correct.
Druitt Street fire?
Yes.
Now, having regard to those fires, and I'll return to those in a moment if I may, but in relation to the aerial inspection that was undertaken on the 19th of February 2020, did you, as a result of that, determine a number of hotspots having regard to Firebird 100 images that had been previously supplied to you?
That's correct. I was supplied with some imagery from some holdings. This, I believe, Firebird 100 came from the Rfs, which provide a number of what I've determined or known as hotspots, which were recorded, I believe, on the afternoon of the 31st of December. I focused my attention in relation to those, given the nature and the size of this fire. Doing an external examination of the fire and working in was just impractical and impossible to be able to achieve. So using a desktop model and reviewing the initial data, we focused on those areas.
And did that initial data include lightning strike data?
That's correct, yes.
And was that data obtained by an organisation that's known as GPATS? That's its acronym.
That's correct, yes.
Now, in relation to the lightning strike data provided by GPATS, what was the location accuracy for their data? Do you know?
I believe it has a reported accuracy of approximately 250 metres, depending on the geographical location where sensors are located, but it reports a 98% of detection efficiency, or up to 92%.
Thank you. In terms of your methodology to try and identify an area of origin for a particular ignition, did you overlay the Firebird 100 imagery together with the lightning strike data obtained by GPATS?
Yes, that's correct. The data pack from the lightning strike on the day in question, being the 31st of December, was extraordinarily large. So we've broken that down into geographical areas and timeframes, and I've overlaid that with the hotspot and focused on that information there, as well as some other weather data, icon information from the RFS, police holdings, fire progression maps, and imagery available.
Now, as a result of that analysis, did you focus on 7 hotspot areas?
That's correct, I did.
And what I propose to do is just to step you through each of those hotspots. If we start firstly with hotspot 1, please, Mr. Hollands, and if we could have brought up the image or the chart at page 259 of Exhibit 15A. Now, this relates to hotspot 1. Firstly, Mr. Hollands, were you able to access hotspot 1 on the ground or not?
No, it was in a very remote area and unfeasible to walk, but I did view it from the air from a helicopter and was able to take some imagery or some photographs from that.
And were you able to identify from the air on the 19th of February 2020 any trees that depicted damage consistent with lightning strike or not?
I was able to see a number of trees that depict damage similar to lightning strikes. Given the altitude and obviously not being able to do a ground-based examination on that, I can't definitively say it's a lightning strike, but it definitely had the characteristics and the appearance of a lightning strike tree.
Now, in relation to the chart displayed now for hotspot 1, do the green markers indicate lightning strikes recorded by GPATs?
That's correct, and for the purpose of this chart, I've put them as date and times, and they're the 4 in relation to that area within a radius of 250 metres.
Thank you. And Mr. Hollands, in relation to the blue marker, which is labelled hotspot 1, is that marker taken from data obtained from Firebird or FB100's lightning run on the 31st of December 2019?
It was definitely from an aerial recording. I believe it was Firebird 100, but it was definitely a GPS location where...
Right. If we go to the next page, page 260, do we see there the FB100 image?
Yes, that's correct. Seeing that, it definitely it is Firebird 100 call sign.
Now, if we then move to page 229, there's a photograph that I understand was taken by you on the 19th of February 2020.
That's correct, yes.
I'll just have that displayed for Her Honour's benefit. And does that show the general area around hotspot 1?
Yes. The general centre of that image, it depicts the tree that has the appearance of a lightning struck tree. Yes, where that pointer is.
I propose now, Mr. Hollands, to move to your evidence in relation to hotspot 2, and if we could have displayed, please, page 261. See if we can have that magnified. In relation to hotspot 2, was there reported to be 3 areas of ignition in that general area?
From the information from the aerial reconnaissance, they depicted 3 areas of hotspots. When for the purposes of trying to document and separate them, have referred to them as 2A, 2B, and 2C. They were within a short or a small distance of each other towards an intersection of fire trails.
And was that intersection the intersection of Gulf Creek Fire Trail and Boundary Fire Trail?
That's correct, yes.
Now, were you able to access this general area of origin on foot or not?
I was, yes.
And did you encounter any limitations as part of your ground-based examination in this general area of hotspot 2?
There's a series of limitations in relation to the entire examination I set out in an initial paragraph. But the time since the ignition, the fact that there was a number of fires have burnt into each other, there was some regeneration of some vegetation which affects indicators, and which affects the macro scale indicators, and they're the main issues that affect that. But I was only able to locate one tree that showed similarities to a lightning strike tree on the ground-based examination.
And I'll come to that shortly. Just to close this aspect of your evidence out, if we could please go to the next image on page 262. Does that show the image taken of those ignitions that were displayed as hotspot 2B in the previous image with the 3 blue markers?
That's correct, it does.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago locating a tree that appeared to be struck by lightning. If we could have brought up a photograph which is located at page 230 of Exhibit 15A. Sorry, 231. My apologies. Does that depict a photograph of the tree to which you referred earlier, that you could only locate one tree that appeared to be damaged by lightning strike?
That's correct, yes.
And for the uninitiated, what features were evident on that tree consistent with lightning strike damage?
On the tree itself, there was signs of damage. There's some scoring or marking towards the tree trunk. It's burned at one end, and it has unburnt at other areas where I believe it's fallen and then continued to burn on the ground once it's been struck. And mainly the scoring and the physical damage.
Thank you, Mr. Hollands. If we then go to hotspot 3 and 4 and to the chart at page 263, were you able to carry out a ground-based examination in relation to hotspot 3 and 4, Mr. Hollands, or not?
We conducted a ground-based examination. We were unable to locate the hotspots that we were able to visualise some trees that depicted damage from the air. The issue was that there was no road in the area and the steep terrain of the area.
And do we see in blue 2 hotspots identified as hotspot 3 and 4, with 2 lightning strikes marked green? And if we go to the next image, 264, which is the FB100 image for their lightning run on the 31st of December, does the thermal image that we see in there relate to hotspot 3 or 4? Do you recall?
I don't recall which one, but it's one of those hotspots. I think it might have been 3 from memory.
And were you able to identify any trees that were struck by lightning from the air or not?
No, from the air, I was able to see some trees that showed similarities and appeared to be struck by lightning, but I was unable to confirm with a ground-based examination.
And I might just have displayed now, Mr. Hollands, page 236, which just shows a photograph of that general area around hotspot 3 and 4 of the fire damage.
That's correct, yes.
Now, if we come now, please, to hotspot 5, which is found at page 265. Were you able to access the area around hotspot 5 by foot or not, Mr. Hollands?
I was, yes. There was roads within the area of the, and forgive my pronunciation, the Tanjara Dam, which is part of the Snowy Hydro scheme. There was an access road up to the top of the ridgeline, which contained a structure which appeared to be related to the workings of the dam there. Off that road at the top of the ridgeline, I was able to walk and access between the road and the ridgeline road.
And if we go to the photograph at page 238, does that show, Mr. Hollands, that road that you referred to in the ridgeline?
The road on the right-hand side, you may be able to see it's a dirt road.
Yes.
That's the, forgive me, the Tanjara Road, or Tanjara Dam Road, I believe. The top left-hand side of the photograph is where the structure was. Following that down to the bottom left-hand side was an easement for a communications network down to the dam proper. The area of hotspot was on the right-hand side between the top of the ridgeline and that road on the right. And
were you able to identify a number of trees that displayed signs of lightning strike in that general area?
I was, yes.
And do we see a photograph of a tree that may have been struck by lightning at page 240?
That's correct, yes.
And again, what was it about this particular tree that led you to the conclusion that it was struck by lightning?
The level of burning, the damage, and the scarring to the tree.
If we turn now to hot spot 6, and that's found in chart on page 266. Do I understand correctly, Mr. Hollands, that you were unable to undertake an aerial inspection of this particular hotspot?
Yes.
Or a ground-based examination?
Correct. Due to weather, I was unable to conduct an aerial reconnaissance of this area. And reviewing mappings and holdings, it was unfeasible and not practical to do a ground-based examination. I have reviewed the data and the lightning strike data, though, in relation to this, but no ground-based examination or aerial was undertaken.
Thank you. Moving, if we may, then to hotspot 7, which is located in terms of your chart at 267-1 of Exhibit 15A.
Yes.
And were you able to access that area around Hotspot 7?
That's correct, yes.
And was this particular hotspot area located off the Doubtful Gap Fire Trail?
That's correct, yes, in very remote area.
Right. And then finally, did you identify an area of interest around Gravel Hut Trail?
Yes, I did. Which I referred to this as the Gravel Hut Trail, not as a hotspot, for ease of reference.
And in that area, were there a number of lightning strikes recorded on the 31st of December 2019?
That's correct, there were.
And I'll just have the chart display, which is found at page 268. Were you able to locate any trees that were consistent with lightning damaged when you undertook your inspection or not?
Yes, I was able to.
And how many trees were you able to identify that appeared to have been struck by lightning in that area around the Gravel Hut Trail?
There appears to be two that I've located. There was a tree indicated to me through an Rfs Fire Investigators report, and I've located that and agreed that appears to have lightning strike damage, in relation to it. There was a second tree a couple of 100 metres from that location which appeared to have damage consistent with lightning strike. Reviewing the...
Sorry, I was going to say, do we see those trees in the photographs that you've attached to your report at page 246?
That's correct, yes. So the 246 tree is the one I located?
Yes. And in relation to the tree identified by your colleagues, do we see that at page 249 or not? Or is it,
I've got it from 250 onwards.
All right, we might bring up, yes, do we have it there?
That's the one I'm referring to at page 250 with the red numbers.
And in relation to the Gravel Hut Trail, is this in the sort of Nungar Ridge or not?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to answer that. I'd have to review some mapping.
As a result of your analysis, did you come to a conclusion as to the most likely cause of the ignitions within the Imagery complex fire?
All the hotspots and areas I examined had lightning data supporting and ground or aerial examinations which supported lightning strikes. I'd also excluded a number of other causes of fire, which I produced in a table.
And that's contained within your expert statement, is it not?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hollands. There may be some further questions.
Mr. Newton, do you have any questions?
No questions, Your Honour.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hollands. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Your Honour, I see the time. Is that convenient?
Yes, we'll take the morning adjournment and resume at 12.
Silence, please, all stand. This coroner's court now resumes.
Yes, Mr. Castleton.
Thank you. I call Mr. Mike Fraturo. If he could be sworn, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you see and hear us, Mr. Fraturo? Yeah, I think you're on mute.
No, I don't think so.
There you are. All right, thank you.
Mr. Fraturo, would you like to take the oath or the affirmation?
Oh, the oath, please.
Thank you. Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Would you please state your full name?
Mike James Fraturo.
And Mr. Fraturo, are you currently attached to the Yass Valley Rural Fire District or Zone?
That's true.
And do you hold the position of firefighter within that fire district?
I'm currently a deputy captain in the fire district.
And have you been involved with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service for in the order of 39 or 40 years?
40 years this year.
And have you in that lengthy time period held the positions of captain,
Yes, yes,
group captain,
yes,
operations officer,
yes,
community safety officer,
yes,
acting district manager?
yes,
And have you in that 40 years attended in excess of 1,000 grass or bushfires in the role of incident controller and firefighter?
yes, I have.
Are you qualified in wildfire investigation?
Yes, I qualified in 2008.
And do you, as part of that qualification, hold a certificate in fire investigation from Charles Sturt University?
I do.
Do you also hold a certificate in wildfire investigation from the Rural Fire Service?
I do.
And are you within the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, Mr. Fraturo, an authorised fire investigator?
I am.
Since your appointment as an authorised fire investigator, how many investigations of wildfire or bushfire scenes have you undertaken?
Until the date of this fire, 74 formal investigations.
In relation to this particular fire, did you undertake a cause and origin investigation into a fire named the Anonymity Complex?
I did. I was tasked to do the Bugtown ignition only.
And have you produced a fire investigation report in relation to the cause and origin of a fire known as the Bugtown fire or ignition?
I have.
And do you have a copy of your report with you this afternoon, Mr. Fraturo?
I do.
Are there any matters within that report that require correction or not?
There is. The lightning map on page 312 of that report,
Yes.
the blue marker on it, which is the position of the tree, has been incorrectly mapped. This all the data was sent to the fire investigation unit and it's come back. That's incorrect. It should be about 200 metres northeast of the lightning indicator above it.
Thank you.
The trees mapped correctly in the police brief, however.
All right. So in relation to a precise location having regard to GPS coordinates, you defer to the report by Mr. Hollands, I take it?
Yes.
And that relates to a specific tree struck by lightning as part of the Bugtown ignition.
That's true, yes.
In relation to the Bugtown ignition, Mr. Fraturo, did you undertake a ground-based inspection on the 21st of January 2020?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to observe the general area of origin or likely area of origin by air or not?
No, there was no air available on that day.
And in relation to your conclusion as to the cause and origin of the Bugtown ignition, what did you conclude?
I concluded very strongly that it was a lightning strike on a green tree.
And in terms of the methodology that you employed to arrive at that conclusion, could you just set out what that methodology was, please?
Certainly, the report contains our approach into the general area of origin, but we actually tracked the fire from the Tantangara Road about 3 kilometres to the east to Gravel's Hut, and couldn't proceed following the running indicators any further because of the boggy terrain. So we followed Gravel's Hut trail around to the heel of the fire and then zigzagged our way up the backing indicators up the hill from Gravel's Hut trail.
What I might do is, if it helps, if I could have brought up, please, the map at 313 next to Mr. Fraturo's report. Does that help identify where you carried out your ground-based examination?
It does, but I might point out that that map is a very early fire map, and it was on the date of the fire scan for that day, so it's not overly accurate. The strike was actually to the southwest of the Gravel's Hut Trail. Gravel's Hut Trail follows the interface between the timbered country and Nungar Creek, which is all open grassland that had been completely grazed out due to the drought, so no fire had taken on there. Well, there was a very small fire just across the track, but nothing significant.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the next map, which is on page 314 of Exhibit 15A.
I'm sorry, I'm losing your... I can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's very broken, but I can hear you. That's a much more accurate prediction of where the tree was, about 300 metres west of the Gravel's Hut Trail.
Now, you're able to track this by undertaking a zigzagging path. Is that what's sometimes referred to as a serpentine track?
I'm sorry, I can't understand. Something going wrong with the link.
What we might do is we'll just see if we can have that rectified at our end, but otherwise we might need to terminate and have you dial back in. I'll just see whether we can sort it out at our end. Please bear with us, Mr. Fraturo. Mr. Fraturo, can you hear me now clearly?
Yeah, that's much better, thank you.
I'll just refer back to that incident map, which is on the screen now, you said that that was a more accurate indication of the area of origin?
Absolutely.
And does the cross within a red circle pinpoint a specific point of origin in relation to the Bugtown ignition, in your opinion?
It does.
And does that pinpoint a particular tree that demonstrated damage consistent with a lightning strike?
It certainly does.
And if I have now brought up a photograph at page 305,
Yes.
I'll just have that displayed. Is that a photograph, Mr. Fritschera, of the particular tree that you concluded had been struck by lightning?
It is, and it shows all the classic indicators of a lightning strike on a green tree.
And what are those classic indicators of a lightning strike on a green tree?
Along the top of the trunk, there's a split that runs in the bark from the top to the base. And also at the base there, you can see there's a billet of wood that's been completely blown out of the base. And there are other billets lying around. And also the blackened roots in the tree. I don't know if anybody's talked to you about the mechanics of lightning strike on green trees, but they all lead to that kind of damage.
Thank you. Now, in relation to fire indicators, what were some of the fire indicators that you observed that led you to this specific point of origin?
We came up from the backing side of the fire and there was staining and sooting, also a bit of leaf freeze and grass fall indicators until we got into this area. And then it turned into running fire indicators, which were staining and sooting and grass tufts, cupping on the grass.
Thank you. Now, in terms of lightning strike data, did you have, as part of your investigation, data of lightning strikes recorded in and around that general area of origin?
I did. And on that lightning strike map that we looked at earlier, that particular strike that's the closest to us occurred very early in the morning of the 29th. That was the closest one. I'm sure that's the one that did it.
Now, obviously, there's a margin of error, but are you able to say how many metres from that recorded lightning strike on the 29th of December to the particular tree that you've identified in your report?
Probably 200 to 300 metres.
300 metres.
Oh, that would be outside.
Now, in terms of other possible causes of ignition, were you able to exclude other possible causes?
It's way too remote for juveniles. It's the last people that were recorded there in the Gravels Hut Trail visitors book was 16th of December. It's not a really particularly trafficable track, and it's a pretty remote area. So those were discounted. At the time of this fire, the Duns Road fire was at Tumbarumba, which is a long, long way away. So I don't think it would, well, I know it wouldn't have been anything that's blown in from that fire. And the fire origin itself is 300 metres from the trail and up in the middle of nowhere, really.
And it's pretty rough and inaccessible country, I take it.
It's not as rough as some of the other country around there, but it is quite remote. It's right in the middle of the Kosciuszko National Park.
And that led you, I take it, to form the firm opinion that the ignition point in relation to the Bugtown fire was caused, more probably than not, by lightning strike.
Oh, absolutely. And earlier than the 31st, the picture, you'll see that the area around it had very low fire intensity. So it's sat in there for quite some time, which is supported by the weather for that day, or those few days.
Thank you, Mr Frittura. There may be some other questions from other counsel.
Mr Newton, any questions?
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you very much, Mr Frittura. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour, the next and final witness in relation to the Imagery complex fire is Mr Warren Menzies, who I understand is in the virtual lobby, and if he could be brought in to court, please, and be sworn. I call Mr Warren Menzies.
Mr Menzies, can you see and hear us? Mr Menzies, can you see and hear us?
It appears they may have left the room. I'll just see if we can get a message to Mr Menzies to re-enter the room. Your Honour, whilst we're waiting for Mr Menzies to be called, tomorrow I'll move to the fire inquiry known as the Border Rockton Fire. The first witness that will be called will be Detective Bradley, followed by Mr Les Veering, who's a senior fire investigator from Victoria, which is where this particular fire first commenced, and then that will conclude the evidence in relation to the Border Rockton Fire, and also in relation to Your Honour's inquiries and inquests for the far southern region. As I understand the position, next week, commencing on Monday the 27th of September 2021, Your Honour will commence inquiries and inquests as a result of the Currowan cluster of fires. I'll just make some inquiries with my instructing solicitors as to whether Mr Menzies is now with us. I'm told he's on his way in now.
Thank you.
I call Warren Menzies.
Mr Menzies.
Yes.
There you are. Just hear from the court officer now. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr Menzies, would you like to take the religious oath or the affirmation when swearing you in?
Affirmation's fine.
Affirmation? Lovely, thank you. Silence, please. Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Mr Menzies, would you please state your full name?
Warren James Menzies.
And do you own a property that's situated on Anglers Reach Road, Anglers Reach, which is north of Old Adaminaby?
That's correct.
And have you provided a statement to New South Wales Police in relation to what is known as the Adaminaby Complex Fire, dated the 13th of May 2020, but signed by you on the 20th of May 2020?
Yes, I have, yes.
And have you read that recently?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Are there any matters that require correction?
No, all straightforward.
I just want to come now to, if I may, the 31st of December 2019. Were you at your property on that day at Anglers Reach Road?
Had been there for a few days, yep.
And at about 7 a.m. That morning, did you make some observations?
Yes, the sky was orange, sort of dull, and everything was smoky behind us. But yeah, it didn't look very good, put it that way.
And did you take a number of photographs at that time?
Yes, I did.
And I'll just have displayed, Mr. Menzies, a photograph which is found at page 354 of Exhibit 15A. Do we see there, Mr. Menzies, a photograph taken by you at 7 a.m. or thereabouts on the 31st of December 2019?
Yes, that's correct. That's looking west.
So that's looking westward?
Yes, that's towards the Duns Road fire, which across the lake is out towards Tumut on that westerly aspect.
Do you have any understanding as to how far the Duns Road fire was at that time your property or not?
I understood that it was a fair way, but it didn't look it from there. But yeah, I'd been following the news for a few days, and it had slowly started to creep eastward, sort of towards us. But it still would have been, I could have been 70 odd kilometres away, that one.
Thank you. And we'll just go to the next photograph, which is found at page 355 of Exhibit 15A. Does that show another photograph looking westward?
No, that's sort of southwest. That's the Doubtful Gap Fire is down that way. The Yukonbean Dam Wall is sort of down that direction, and that's the Doubtful Gap Fire coming up the lake, sort of heading north from the dam wall up, which is worrying because it's pretty windy. It'd been windy for a long time, so as you can see, the grass is all dead and everything. So we're getting burnt leaves sort of falling around as well. So that was worrying.
Can I just ask you this? Was this photograph also taken at about 7 a.m. on the 31st of December 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you mentioned that this photograph, which shows smoke, was coming from the Doubtful Gap Fire. Are you sure it was coming from the Doubtful Gap Fire at that time?
Yep, that's sort of down the southern end of the lake.
Right. The reason I say that is that the evidence before Her Honour is that the Doubtful Gap Fire may have ignited in the afternoon of the 31st of December, not in the morning, if that helps you with your timing or your directions.
Oh, it was sort of, it's been burning from down that end for a fair while. To my understanding, the fire has been going down around the southern end of Yukonbean for a while. When you see the photo from on top of the block looking westwards, you can see right around the smoke and fire down that way.
And at 11:30 a.m, did you take two other photographs from a point on your property?
That's correct, at the top of the hill, yep.
And do we see the first of those on page 356?
Yes, that's sort of from the right-hand side of the front of the cruiser there. You can see the smoke down there that's coming from Duns Road. That's a fair way off, but it was heading this way.
Right, so again, 11:30 a.m. in the morning, and it's your understanding that that's looking towards the Duns Road fire in
That's
a
correct.
generally westerly direction from that high point of your property.
That's correct, yes.
And we'll just show one further photograph that I understand you took at 11:30 a.m. on the 31st. And again, is that a view from a high point on your property looking towards the Duns Road fire?
Well, Duns Road is again fair off to the right, but down like the bottom, the back of the car there, down, that's right out there, is the Yukonbean Dam wall. It's my understanding that's the Doubtful Gap Fire was coming up that way. From down at the dam wall, which is a fair way off again.
Now, I want to move forward from 11:30 a.m. to about 2 p.m. that same day, the 31st of December.
Yes.
Did you make any observations at about that time of anything of particular note?
It was pretty windy and worrying. Very hot wind and storms was brewing. You could hear thunder, and then observed lightning strikes to the north of our property.
Is north of your property Bugtown Road?
Yes, we can look sort of out across, be a few other farms there, and then you hit the Snowy Mountains Highway. Bugtown Road goes from our side, crosses the Snowy Mountains Highway, and then across again to the Yayak Road.
And how many lightning strikes do you recall seeing towards Bugtown Road?
Saw about 4, and then there was Mars Hill, which is another hill next closer to us. I saw about 4 strikes hit that as well, and that scared me a fair bit because everything windy and dry, it's very dangerous.
Was it dry lightning, or was there rain with these strikes? Do you remember?
Dry lightning, which, as I said, worried me a lot because it's bad, very bad conditions.
And just on the conditions, was it a hot day?
Very hot, very windy, and yeah, it had been like that for months.
Do you remember? Thank you. Do you remember which direction the wind was blowing that afternoon on the 31st of December, or not?
It was coming from the north. That's why I started getting water from the lake, pumping it into tanks on the 4-wheel drive to start wetting everything down, because if it came, we'd have to be prepared. So it's coming from the north.
Thank you. In terms of your preparedness, what was your plan should your property be impacted by fire?
I'd got the tractor and pushed in fire breaks. As you can see on some of the photos here, the ground is very dry, not very long grass, so grass fire wouldn't have been a big issue. So I pushed in some fire breaks around, put all the machinery out in the middle of the paddock, and proceeded to wet everything as best we could.
Now, you mentioned that you went down to the lake to fill up your tanks.
That's correct.
When you got back to the property, did you make any observations in relation to fire?
Yes, the smoke started to billow from the lightning strike area. A friend of mine lives out that way. His name is Ben Russell. So I called him and no answer, because I dare say that he knew what was going on, and he's with the fire brigade, and I dare say that he'd acted on that. So after that I called 000.
If I could just do it in turn, do you remember about what time you may have made the observation of fire and smoke?
Yeah, those phone calls would have been at 2:30, 2:45, 3 o'clock, around that area.
And in terms of calling it into 000, about what time do you think that may have been?
2:45, around that sort of time.
Did you take some photographs of what you saw at about that time that you made those phone calls?
Yes, I did.
And do we see one of those photographs at page 358 of Exhibit 15A? I'll just bring that up for you, Mr. Menzies.
Yes, that's it.
And do I understand that that's taken from your property looking northward?
That's correct, yes.
At that time, Are you able to say how high the column of smoke was rising or not?
It's hard to say because it looked close, but I still haven't been where it started over that direction. So that column of smoke could even be about 100 foot high. And that falls into a valley down behind off the Snowy Mountains Highway.
Now, in terms of the location of that column of smoke, was that towards Bugtown Road where you'd made the earlier observations of dry lightning strikes?
It'd be in that vicinity, yes.
You've said in your statement that by this time the dark cloud had moved overhead, sending the area into darkness. It felt like the end of the world.
It did at the time, yeah.
Why was that?
Oh, just the doom and gloom. You just didn't know what was going to happen if that sort of blew towards us. Just having to leave there, we couldn't even be stuck there because you'd have to drive out through to Adaminaby in that direction. So if that blew, which eventually did come close to Adaminaby, there was sort of no way out. So even some neighbours above me, they said we'll all meet at the lake, which is sort of to our southeast sort of vicinity. So we'd all meet down there. He took all of his possessions down there in his boat, so he was prepared to do like a Malakuta thing, just get on the lake, and you're in the middle of the lake, safe from fire.
Was there any ash in the air at the time you took that photograph and the next photograph, which is at page 359, or not?
There was more, not so much from that fire, but the Duns Road we were getting burnt leaves coming sort of from the west, coming towards us. Not hot burnt leaves, but just burnt leaves. So that one hadn't really taken off as yet, the complex fire.
And did your property get impacted by any of the fires or not?
Thank goodness, no. It stayed on the northern side of the Snowy Mountains Highway. It did come around up further, which is towards Providence Portal, which is sort of the northwest of us. It did cross the highway there, and it did get into the mountain range which comes to us, but it was extinguished then.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Menzies. They are my questions.
Just see if there's any other questions, Mr. Menzies. Mr. Newton?
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Menzies. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour now has the benefit of the documentary material contained within Exhibit 15A and the oral testimony from Detective Senior Constable Ben Waldron, Senior Crime Scene Officer Mark Hollands, Rfs Fire Investigator Mike Futuro, and just now from property owner Warren Menzies. At a later stage in Your Honour's inquiry into the 2019-2020 bushfire season, those assisting Your Honour will formally address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Adaminaby complex fire. In that regard, I can foreshadow now that a formal submission is likely to be made that the Adaminaby complex fire was a culmination of multiple ignitions that occurred in the general area at the eastern spread of the Duns Road fire. The multiple ignitions were all caused by lightning strikes in late December 2019. Your Honour, would Your Honour please stand this matter over to the 5th of September 2022 as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's inquiries?
Yes, I do that now. Thank you.
Your Honour, that concludes the Adaminaby complex fire. As I said a moment ago, tomorrow those assisting Your Honour will move into the Border Rockton fire.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton. We'll adjourn now and resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Please the Court.